I woke to the sound of warmth, not a noise exactly, but the quiet percussion of 12 heartbeats that weren't mine, drumming against the silence of my cabin. Before I opened my eyes, I felt them. The impossible weight pressing down on my quilt, the slight rise and fall of breathing bodies, the occasional twitch of a paw against my ribs. 12 pairs of eyes stared at me when I finally dared to look. Wolf pups. Not just any pups. His pups. The sacred litter of the Lycan king. They formed a protective circle around me, some sprawled across my legs, others nestled against my sides. Their fur ranged from storm cloud gray to timber brown, but their eyes, every single pair, glowed with an otherworldly amber that pierced straight through me. My breath caught as I slowly sat up. Royal pups were said to be feral, untouchable. Yet they remained still, watching me with an intelligence that made my pulse spike. I'd lived in this cabin on the borderlands for 2 years, grateful to be forgotten. In the Blood Moon Pack, Omegas like me weren't just low-ranking. We were invisible. I kept my head down, braided my blonde hair tight, and never drew attention from anyone above my station. Especially not from the king. My fingers found the oak leaf pendant my mother had given me before she died. "Stay small. Stay safe," she'd whispered. I clutched it now as the pups' collective gaze made my skin prickle with recognition, as if they were waiting for me to remember something I'd deliberately forgotten. The largest pup, midnight fur, silver eyes too ancient for his young body, lifted his head from my knee and released a low rumble that vibrated through my bones. A sound of approval. That's when I saw him. King Orion stood in my doorway, his frame filling the entrance completely. Even in silhouette, his presence was suffocating, raw power wrapped in corded muscle. His long dark hair fell over bare shoulders marked with ritual scars, and he watched me with those infamous black eyes that had condemned 100 wolves to death. Touching the royal pups was forbidden. Being found with them in my bed? That was grounds for execution. I opened my mouth to beg, but my voice died when I noticed something impossible. When Orion took a step into my cabin, the midnight pup growled at him. At the king. Then, one by one, the others joined in, 12 small bodies forming a tighter barrier around me, their message unmistakable. She is ours. And we are hers. Something flickered in Orion's obsidian eyes. Not anger. Hunger. "Get dressed, Ember," he said, his voice like gravel and smoke. "You've been chosen for the lunar selection. And my children have just made their vote very clear." The lunar selection. The deadly trial meant for highborn females with power and ambition. Not for a forgotten Omega who just wanted to survive in the shadows. But as the king's gaze dragged slowly over me, over the pups who refused to leave my side, over the pendant clutched in my shaking hand, I realized something with bone-deep certainty. This wasn't just a test. This was a claiming. And I had no idea if I was meant to be the prize or the sacrifice. Orion didn't wait for permission. He crossed the threshold of my cabin in 3 measured strides, each footfall deliberate, predatory. The floorboards groaned under his weight, and the air itself seemed to thicken with the raw dominance that rolled off him in waves. Every instinct I had screamed at me to lower my eyes, to bare my throat in submission the way every Omega was taught from birth. But the pups wouldn't let me. The midnight pup, the one with silver eyes, positioned himself directly between us, his small body trembling with the effort of standing against his own father. The others followed his lead, forming a living shield around where I sat frozen on the bed. Their growls intensified, higher-pitched now, desperate. One of the smaller females even snapped her teeth in warning. Orion stopped. His gaze dropped to his children, and for a moment, something unreadable flickered across his harsh features. Not anger, as I'd expected. Not even irritation. He looked curious, calculating. "Interesting," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that made my stomach clench. His black eyes lifted to mine, and I felt the full weight of his attention like a physical touch. They've never done this before. Not even for their mother. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know if speaking would make this worse. My fingers twisted in the quilt, knuckles white. He circled slowly, never taking his eyes off me, studying the way the pups tracked his movement with tense vigilance. When he reached for one of them, a grey male near my feet, the entire litter erupted in snarls. The midnight pup actually lunged, tiny teeth bared. Orion withdrew his hand, a dark smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "They've imprinted on you." He said it like a diagnosis, a revelation. "Do you understand what that means, Ember?" My name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "It means they've chosen their Luna." He straightened to his full height, and the cabin suddenly felt impossibly small. "And when the sacred litter chooses, the pack follows, whether the council likes it or not." Before I could process his words, he turned toward the door and whistled, one sharp, commanding note. A figure appeared in the doorway almost instantly, as if he'd been waiting. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy hair and the bearing of a warrior. His eyes widened when he took in the scene. "Daniel," Orion said without preamble, his tone shifting into pure command. "Escort Miss Ember to the castle. The East Wing. She'll need chambers appropriate for a selection candidate." He paused, his gaze sliding back to me with that same dangerous hunger. "And station guards at her door. For her protection, of course." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Protection from what, or whom, he didn't specify. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. "Yes, my king." Orion moved toward the door, then stopped at the threshold, his broad shoulders blocking out the morning light. "The pups will follow you," he said, not bothering to look back. "Don't try to run, little Omega. You're part of this now." His voice dropped lower, intimate and terrifying. "And I always claim what's mine." Then he was gone, leaving me trembling on the bed with 12 pairs of amber eyes still watching, still protecting, still waiting for me to understand what I'd just become. Not a candidate. Prey. The pack house rose before me like a monument to everything I'd spent years avoiding. Towering stone walls, arched windows that glinted like watchful eyes, and an entrance wide enough to swallow me whole. Daniel walked 3 paces ahead, his silence more oppressive than conversation would have been. Behind me, 12 sets of paws padded against the cobblestone path in perfect synchronization. We'd barely crossed the threshold into the main hall when I heard the laughter. "You cannot be serious." The voice was silk wrapped around steel, dripping with disbelief. A woman descended the grand staircase like she owned every step, her crimson dress hugging curves that spoke of privilege and power. Her dark hair cascaded in artful waves, and her amber eyes, unmistakably high-born, raked over me with open contempt. "This is the king's chosen candidate." Another woman appeared from a side corridor, smaller but no less dangerous. Her copper curls were piled in an elaborate style, and her emerald gown probably cost more than my cabin. She covered her mouth with delicate fingers, but her smile was vicious. "Oh, Lola, look at those braids. How rustic. Does she even own a mirror?" Lola circled me slowly, and I forced myself to stand still, to keep my chin level even as shame burned hot in my chest. My simple gray dress, the nicest thing I owned, suddenly felt like rags. "I heard she's an Omega," Lola purred, stopping just close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "A seamstress from the borderlands. Tell me, little mouse, did you sneak into the king's chambers, desperate for a taste of real power?" "She didn't," Daniel started, but I cut him off. "I didn't ask for this." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "The pups came to me." "The pups?" Maya's laugh was crystalline and cruel. "How convenient. And I suppose they just happened to find the only Omega pathetic enough to." The midnight pup snarled, a sound far too deep for his small body. In an instant, all 12 pups moved as one, placing themselves between me and the 2 women. Their hackles rose, their amber eyes blazing with ancient fury. The smallest female snapped her teeth inches from Lola's expensive shoes. Lola stumbled backward, her face paling. "Control them." "I'm not, I can't," but even as I spoke, the pups pressed closer to my legs, their message clear. Maya retreated up 3 steps, her earlier confidence evaporating. "They need to return to the nursery." A stern-faced woman in grey robes appeared from a side corridor, her voice clipped with authority. The royal nursemaid. The selection begins tomorrow. The king's litter must be secured. Daniel cleared his throat. The king ordered. I know what the king ordered. She approached with a woven basket of meat, clicking her tongue in the special call used to summon the pups. They didn't even glance her way. She tried again, her voice taking on a frustrated edge. Come, little ones. Come. The midnight pup sat at my feet and tilted his head back to look at me, his silver eyes unblinking. The others followed suit, forming a semicircle around me like an honor guard. Like I was already their Luna. The nursemaid's lips pressed into a thin line. This is highly irregular. Everything about this is irregular, Lola hissed, her composure cracking. She pointed one perfectly manicured finger at me. She's done something to them. Used some kind of omega trick. Enough. Daniel's command cut through the hall. He turned to me, and I saw something almost like pity in his eyes. Your chambers are this way. It seems, you'll have company. As I followed him up the stairs, the pups trailing behind me like a living shadow, I felt Lola's and Maya's gazes burning into my back. I'd made enemies before even understanding the game I'd been forced to play. And somewhere in this vast stone fortress, the king was watching. Waiting. Hunting. The maze entrance yawned before us like the mouth of some ancient beast, carved from black stone that seemed to swallow the morning light. 8 candidates stood in a line, and I could feel their confidence radiating like heat. They wore fitted leather and silk, their hair styled for battle and beauty. I'd braided mine simply, plaited tight against my skull to keep it out of my way. Frank, the eldest council member, raised his gnarled staff. His grey beard couldn't hide the contempt twisting his mouth when his eyes landed on me. The trial of instinct tests your ability to navigate by more than sight. The maze shifts. It lies. It will show you what you fear most and promise you what you desire. He paused, letting his words settle like stones. The first to reach the center and ring the moon bell claims victory. The last. His smile was cold. Will be eliminated from the selection. My stomach dropped. Eliminated. The word tasted like ash. The king's litter will remain here, Frank continued, gesturing to a stone pen where the pups had been confined. They paced restlessly, their eyes fixed on me. The midnight pup pressed his face between the bars, whining low in his throat. Begin. The candidates surged forward as one. I hesitated for just a heartbeat before plunging into the darkness behind them. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world twisted. The walls breathed. Whispers slithered along the stone, forming words I couldn't quite catch. Lola's crimson dress flashed ahead, then vanished around a corner. Maya's footsteps echoed from somewhere above, or was it below? I turned left, then right, following some instinct I couldn't name. But the maze had other plans. The corridor opened into a vast chamber where my mother stood waiting, her arms outstretched, her face exactly as I remembered before the fever took her. Ember, my little Ember. You can rest now. Come home. My feet moved toward her before my mind could catch up. The longing was a physical ache in my chest. But then I heard it. A sound so faint I almost missed it beneath my mother's voice. Howling. Distant. Desperate. The pups. I closed my eyes, shutting out the illusion. My mother's voice turned sharp, accusatory, then faded to nothing. In the sudden silence, I pressed my palm flat against the cold stone floor and did something I hadn't done in years. I listened. Not with my ears. With something deeper. The earth hummed beneath my fingertips, ancient and alive. I felt the maze's pattern like a map drawn in my bones. Every twist, every dead end, every illusion waiting to ensnare. And threading through it all, like a silver cord pulling me forward, I felt the pups' presence. Their howls weren't just sound. They were direction. North. East. Straight ahead. I ran blind, my eyes still closed, trusting the vibration in my blood. Behind me, I heard Lola curse as she hit another dead end. Maya's frustrated scream echoed from somewhere far to my left. The other candidates were still searching, still fighting the maze's deceptions. But I wasn't fighting. I was following. The howls grew louder, more urgent, pulling me through a narrow passage that shouldn't have existed. My shoulder scraped stone. My boots splashed through shallow water. And then, suddenly, the darkness lifted. I opened my eyes. The moon bell hung before me in a circular chamber open to the sky, silver and ancient and waiting. My hand trembled as I reached for the rope. The sound that rang out was pure and clear, echoing across the entire pack house grounds. I'd finished first. Minutes later, the other candidates began stumbling into the chamber, their faces twisted with shock and fury. Lola's perfect hair hung in tangles. Maya's dress was torn. And there, at the entrance to the maze, the pups pressed against their pen and howled in triumph. The midnight pups' silver eyes found mine across the distance. "We knew you could hear us," they seemed to say. "We always knew." I couldn't sleep. The chamber they'd given me was too large, too quiet despite the 12 pups sprawled across the massive bed. My skin still hummed with whatever had awakened in the maze, that connection to the earth, to something ancient buried deep in my bones. I needed air, space to think. The garden was supposed to be deserted this late. Moonlight painted the stone paths silver, and night-blooming flowers released their heavy perfume into the darkness. I wrapped my thin shawl tighter and wandered deeper into the labyrinth of hedges, letting the cool air settle my racing thoughts. You shouldn't be out here alone. I spun around, my heart lurching into my throat. Orion emerged from the shadows like he'd been carved from them, still shirtless, his ritual scars catching the moonlight. He moved with that same predatory grace, closing the distance between us in 3 silent strides. I couldn't, the words tangled on my tongue. This close, he was overwhelming. The sheer size of him, the heat radiating from his skin, the way his black eyes seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever built. "You won today." It wasn't a question. He tilted his head, studying me the way a wolf studies prey before the strike. "The council is displeased. Frank believes you cheated." "I didn't." "I know." He stepped closer, and my back hit the garden wall. "Trapped. But that doesn't answer my question." His voice dropped to a rumble that I felt in my chest. "How did you do it, Ember? How did a lowly Omega navigate a maze that has broken warriors?" I listened. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. "To what?" "To them. Your children." I lifted my chin, forcing myself to meet his gaze even as my pulse hammered. "They showed me the way." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He braced one hand against the wall beside my head, caging me in. "Impossible. The pups were locked away. They couldn't have." I heard them anyway. My voice was barely a whisper now. Their howls. In my bones. He went perfectly still. Then, slowly, he leaned in, his face inches from my neck. I felt his breath ghost across my skin, raising goosebumps in its wake. He inhaled deeply, and the sound he made was almost a growl. "What are you?" The question was rough, desperate, as if my existence offended every law he knew. "I don't know." And that was the terrifying truth. "I'm just." "You're not just anything." He pulled back enough to look at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than control in his expression. Uncertainty. Hunger. Need. "You're sent. It's not Omega. Not entirely. There's something else. Something that calls to." He stopped, his jaw clenching as if he'd said too much. "Calls to what?" "To the beast." His hand moved from the wall to my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with shocking gentleness. "Every alpha carries a beast inside, a madness that grows stronger with each year. It's why we need mates. Why we need Lunas." His eyes searched mine, black and fathomless. "The right mate can soothe it, calm it, but the wrong one." "What?" My voice cracked. "The wrong one dies trying." His thumb stilled against my skin. "But you. When I'm near you, the beast doesn't rage. It Quiets. For the first time in years, it quiets. The confession hung between us, fragile and terrifying. This was vulnerability, raw and real from a man who ruled through fear and strength. "Why did they choose you?" he asked again, his voice barely audible. "My children. Why you?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, and I was too afraid to speak it aloud. "Maybe," I whispered, "they knew before you did." His hand tightened against my face, and for one breathless moment, I thought he might kiss me, claim me right there beneath the moon. Instead, he stepped back, his expression shuttering closed like a door slamming. "Get inside. Lock your door." It was pure command again. The vulnerable man vanished. The selection isn't over. And not everyone wants you to survive it. Then he was gone, leaving me trembling against the wall with the ghost of his touch still burning on my skin. The courtyard had been cleared, the remaining candidates arranged in a semicircle around a massive iron cage. Inside, something paced, massive, wrong, its movements jerky and unnatural. The wolf was easily twice the size of a normal Lycan, his grey fur matted with dried blood and foam dripping from his bared fangs. His eyes were pure white, rolled back in madness. Frank stood before the cage, his satisfaction barely concealed behind a mask of solemnity. The trial of the heart tests your ability to lead with compassion, not just strength. His gaze slid to me, cold and calculating. A Luna must be able to reach even the most lost members of her pack. This is Ephraim. Once, he was our finest warrior. Now, he is consumed by bloodlust, the final stage before a Lycan turns rogue. Maya took a step back. Even Lola's confidence seemed to waver. "You will each attempt to calm him," Frank continued. "Without weapons. Without force. Show us the strength of your lunar spirit." The words were a challenge, and everyone in the courtyard knew it. This was designed to eliminate me. An Omega had no lunar spirit. No power to command respect from a feral beast. "I'll go first." Lola stepped forward, her crimson dress replaced by fitted leather armor. She approached the cage with her chin high, projecting dominance with every step. "Ephraim, I am Lola of the Blood Moon Pack. You will submit to me." The wolf's head snapped toward her. His lips peeled back, and the sound that emerged was barely recognizable as a growl, more like metal scraping bone. Lola's hand trembled as she reached for the cage latch. "Submit. I command you as your future." Ephraim lunged. The cage shook with the impact, and Lola stumbled backward with a cry. The wolf threw himself against the bars again and again, his roars shaking the courtyard. Blood splattered from where his shoulders hit iron. "Enough!" Frank's voice cracked like a whip. Warriors rushed forward to secure the cage as Lola retreated, her face pale, her failure absolute. Maya declined before she was even called. I cannot." Frank's smile was thin when he turned to me. "Well then, it seems we're down to our little Omega. Unless you'd like to forfeit." The pups pressed against my legs, whining. The Midnight One looked up at me with those ancient silver eyes, and I felt it again, that connection, that pull towards something I didn't understand. I stepped forward. "Ember, don't." Daniel's warning came from somewhere behind me, but my feet kept moving. Toward the cage. Toward the broken wolf inside who'd once been a man, a warrior, someone's packmate. Ephraim's white eyes found me. His growl intensified, saliva mixing with blood as he bared teeth meant for killing. I knelt before the cage, ignoring the gasps behind me. I level now. Vulnerable. And then, without thinking, without planning, I began to hum. It was my mother's lullaby, the one she'd sung when the fever was taking her, when she'd stroked my hair and told me I was special. The melody was simple, old, passed down through generations of spirit walkers, though I hadn't known it then. My voice was soft, barely more than a breath, but in the sudden silence of the courtyard, it carried. Ephraim's lunging stopped. His massive head tilted, confusion breaking through the madness. I kept humming, letting the sound wrap around him like a blanket. The pups joined in, not with voices, but with a resonance that harmonized with mine, amplifying it. The air itself seemed to shimmer. Slowly, impossibly, Ephraim's white eyes began to clear. Brown bled back into them, human awareness surfacing through the fog of bloodlust. He took one step toward me, then another, until his massive head pressed against the bars near my hand. I reached through, my fingers finding the matted fur behind his ear. He collapsed. Not in violence, but in exhaustion, his eyes finally closing as his breathing evened into sleep. Real sleep, not the fitful madness that had consumed him. The courtyard was silent. Then Orion's voice cut through the stillness, rough with something I couldn't name. The Omega wins the trial of the heart. Frank's face had gone ashen, his certainty crumbling. And I finally understood what terrified them most. Not that I might fail, but that I might succeed. The ceremonial dress had been delivered that morning, white silk embroidered with silver thread in patterns of moon phases and wolf tracks. It was meant for tonight's feast before the final trial, a display of the remaining candidates before the entire pack. I'd hung it carefully by the window, marveling at its beauty, at the impossibility that something so fine was meant for me. Now it lay in ribbons on my chamber floor. My hands shook as I lifted the shredded fabric, silk slipping through my fingers like water. The cuts were precise, deliberate. This wasn't accidental damage. Someone had taken a blade to it with purpose, with hatred. No, no, no. The feast began in 2 hours. Every candidate was required to attend. Without the ceremonial dress, I'd be showing disrespect to the king, to the entire selection. Grounds for immediate elimination. A knock at my door made me jump. "Miss Ember? Your meal." I opened it to find a young servant girl with a covered tray. Her eyes darted nervously down the corridor before she set it on my table and hurried away. The 12 pups, who'd been napping on my bed, lifted their heads in unison, their nostrils flaring. The midnight pup growled low. I lifted the silver dome. Roasted meat and root vegetables, still steaming. My stomach clenched with hunger. I'd barely eaten since the trials began. I reached for the fork. A massive hand caught my wrist. "Don't!" Ephraim's voice was rough from disuse, his brown eyes urgent. He stood in my doorway, still gaunt from his time in madness, but steady. "Whole. It's poisoned." "What?" The fork clattered from my grip. He moved to the tray, his nose close to the food. "Wolfsbane. Ground into the sauce. Enough to make you violently ill." His gaze lifted to mine, and something like shame flickered there. "Not enough to kill. Just enough to ensure you can't attend tonight." My throat tightened. "Lola. It had to be. How did you? I owe you a debt." He straightened, and despite his weakened state, he carried himself like the warrior he'd once been. "You pulled me back from the edge. Gave me myself again when everyone else had given up." His jaw clenched. I heard whispers in the barracks. "Lola's been paying servants, making promises. She's desperate. The king barely looks at her anymore." Because he was looking at me. The thought sent heat through my chest, followed immediately by cold fear. Orion's attention had painted a target on my back. The dress. I gestured helplessly at the ruins. "I know." She had Maya distract the guards while she slipped in. Ephraim's expression darkened. "But I may have a solution." He disappeared into the corridor and returned moments later with a bundle of deep green fabric. This was my sister's. She wore it to her own lunar ceremony before. He stopped, grief crossing his features. "Before the fever took her. It's not as fine as yours was, but it's ceremonial. It will be appropriate." I took the dress with trembling hands. The fabric was soft, well-made, embroidered with simpler patterns but no less beautiful. "Ephraim, I can't." "You can. You will." His voice was firm. "My sister would have wanted it worn by someone worthy. Someone who leads with compassion instead of cruelty." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Watch your back tonight, Ember. Lola failed twice now. She won't fail a third time." After he left, I held the green dress against my chest and looked at the pups. They'd formed their protective circle again, their eyes watchful. The midnight pup moved to the destroyed white dress and urinated on it. Despite everything, I laughed, a short, sharp sound that was half-sob. I feel the same way. But as I dressed for the feast, my hands still shaking, I couldn't shake Ephraim's warning. The final trial was tomorrow. The hunt. And somewhere in this castle, Lola was planning something far worse than ruined dresses and poisoned food. Something that wouldn't leave me just eliminated. Something that would leave me dead. The ironwood forest earned its name from trees so ancient their bark had turned black as forged metal. Their branches twisted overhead, choking out the afternoon sun until only thin shafts of grey light penetrated the canopy. I stood at the forest's edge with the 3 remaining candidates, Lola, Maya, and myself. The others had been eliminated or had withdrawn, unable to face what came next. Frank raised his staff one final time, his weathered face grave. The hunt is the oldest trial, the most sacred. His eyes lingered on me with barely concealed malice. You will be released into the forest. The king will shift and hunt you in his beast form. Survive until moonrise without being caught, and you prove yourself worthy. He paused, letting the weight settle. But know this, the king in his beast form knows no mercy. He is pure instinct, pure predator. If he catches you, he didn't need to finish. We all knew. Caught meant claimed. Or killed. You have a 2-hour head start. Frank's smile was cruel. I suggest you use it wisely. The horn sounded, low and mournful. Maya bolted immediately, crashing through the underbrush with panic driving her steps. Lola moved with more calculation, heading east toward the river where she could mask her scent. I watched them go, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I ran. The forest swallowed me whole. Roots tried to trip my feet. Branches caught at my borrowed dress, Ephraim's sister's dress, now stained with dirt and torn at the hem. My breath came in sharp gasps, my lungs burning as I pushed deeper into the darkness. Every snapping twig behind me sounded like death approaching. An hour passed. Then another. The light began to fail. I'd climbed a rocky outcropping, thinking height would give me advantage, when I heard it. The howl. It started low, resonating through the earth itself, then rose into something primal and terrifying. Not quite wolf. Not quite human. Something in between. Something ancient and unstoppable. The hunt had begun. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, every muscle tensing, every sense sharpening. I should run. Should hide. Should do anything except what I was doing, which was standing frozen, listening to that howl with something that felt disturbingly like longing. Another howl answered the first. Closer now. To my left. I ran right, my feet finding purchase on instinct. The forest blurred past. I could hear him now, the massive weight of his body crashing through the undergrowth, the heavy panting, the occasional snarl when branches blocked his path. He was toying with me. Could have caught me already if he'd wanted to. But he wanted the chase. I burst into a small clearing and stopped, my chest heaving. Moonlight filtered through a break in the canopy, painting everything silver. And in that moment of stillness, with my heart trying to break through my ribs and the taste of fear sharp on my tongue, I realized something that should have terrified me. I wasn't running from him. I was running to him. Every turn I'd made, every direction I'd chosen, they'd all been drawing me closer to where I felt his presence strongest. Like the maze. Like the earth speaking through my bones. The bond between us was a thread I couldn't see but could feel pulling taut, reeling me in. The forest went silent. I turned slowly, knowing before I saw him that he was there. The king's beast form emerged from the shadows, massive, easily 8 feet tall at the shoulder, fur black as midnight with eyes that glowed molten gold. His muscles rippled beneath his pelt, and his teeth were bared in what could have been a snarl or a smile. Saliva dripped from his jaw. He should have been terrifying. He was terrifying. But standing there in the moonlight, with the beast circling me like I was prey and predator at once, I felt something click into place. Something that had been broken inside me suddenly made whole. I'm not afraid of you, I whispered, though my voice shook with the lie. The beast's head tilted, studying, assessing. Then he lunged, and the world exploded into motion. The beast's weight slammed into me, driving me to the ground. His massive paws pinned my shoulders, claws pricking through fabric to skin. His muzzle was inches from my throat, hot breath washing over me in waves. Those molten gold eyes bored into mine, searching for something: fear, submission, recognition. I should have been terrified, should have begged for mercy. Instead, I reached up with trembling fingers and touched his face. The beast went utterly still. His eyes widened, something almost human flickering in their depths. Then the forest exploded. They came from everywhere at once, wolves, but wrong. Their fur was matted and diseased, their eyes fever-bright with madness. Rogues, at least a dozen of them, erupting from the shadows with teeth bared and bloodlust in their throats. This wasn't part of the trial. This was an ambush, an assassination. The beast, Orion, spun away from me with a roar that shook the trees. He met the first rogue mid-leap, jaws closing around the attacker's throat with a sickening crunch. Two more came at him from the sides. He was magnificent and terrible, a whirlwind of fur and fury, but there were too many. They'd planned this. Waited for the hunt when he'd be alone, when his guards would be stationed at the forest's edge, when he'd be vulnerable. Movement to my right. Lola stood frozen at the clearing's edge, her face white with terror. For one heartbeat, our eyes met. Then she turned and ran, her footsteps disappearing into the darkness. Abandoning him. Abandoning us all. A rogue broke through Orion's defenses, its claws raking across his flank. He bellowed in pain and rage, blood spattering the moonlit ground. Three more circled behind him. They were coordinating, working as a pack, trying to bring down the king. My body moved before my mind caught up. I stepped between Orion and the advancing rogues, my arms spread wide, every instinct screaming that this was suicide. Stop! My voice was barely a whisper, lost in the chaos. A rogue lunged at me, jaws wide. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't breaking, it was awakening. Power erupted from my core like a dam bursting, ancient and wild and absolutely furious. White light exploded from my skin, so bright I had to close my eyes against it. The air itself seemed to scream, and I felt rather than saw the rogues being thrown backward by the shockwave. When I opened my eyes, the world had changed. Silver flames, not fire, but pure luminescent energy, wreathed my hands and arms. My shadow on the ground wasn't black but glowing white, and symbols I'd never learned but somehow recognized pulsed across my skin like living tattoos. Spirit walker marks. The bloodline I'd inherited but never understood, never embraced. The rogues cowered, whimpering. Even in their madness, they recognized what I was. What I'd always been. Behind me, Orion's beast form had gone completely still. I could feel his gaze on my back, heavy and awed. The largest rogue, scarred and ancient, clearly the pack leader, snarled and gathered himself for another attack. Desperation made him bold. He charged. I raised my hand, and the silver light coalesced into a spear of pure energy. It shot forward, not to kill but to subdue, striking the rogue in the chest and sending him crashing into a tree trunk. He slumped, unconscious but alive. The others broke and ran, disappearing into the forest like smoke. Silence fell, broken only by my ragged breathing and Orion's low growl. The silver flames around my hands flickered and died, the marks on my skin fading to invisible. The exhaustion hit me all at once. Whatever I'd done had drained me completely. My knees buckled. Massive jaws caught the back of my dress, holding me upright. Gently. So impossibly gently. Orion's beast lowered me to the ground, and I felt the shift begin. Bones cracking, muscles reforming, fur receding. Within moments, the man knelt before me, naked and bleeding but whole, his black eyes wide with something that looked like reverence. "You're a spirit walker." His voice was rough with awe. The bloodline was supposed to be extinct. I tried to speak, but the world was tilting, darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. The last thing I heard before consciousness fled was Orion's voice, fierce and possessive and final. Mine. You're mine, and I'm never letting you go. I woke to the sound of howling, not distant, but close, triumphant. The 12 pups surrounded me where I lay in the blood-stained clearing, their bodies forming a protective circle, their voices raised in a song that seemed to shake the very stars. The midnight pup pressed his nose against my cheek, whining softly. "I'm all right," I whispered, though my voice was raw and my body felt hollowed out. "I'm all right." Strong hands lifted me gently, cradling me against a bare chest still warm from the shift. Orion held me like I was made of glass, his black eyes searching my face with an intensity that stole what little breath I had left. Blood from the rogue's claws had dried on his skin, but the wounds were already healing. "You saved my life." His voice was rough, barely controlled. "You stood between me and death without hesitation, without thought for yourself." "I couldn't let them," my words caught. "I couldn't let them take you." Something in his expression cracked. The fierce, untouchable king I'd feared from a distance was gone, replaced by a man staring at salvation he'd never expected to find. "Do you understand what you've done? What you've shown the pack?" Beyond the clearing, I could hear movement. The sound of many feet, many voices. Daniel emerged first from the tree line, followed by Frank and the council members, then warriors and pack members, drawn by the light, by the howls, by the impossible power that had torn through the forest. Even Maya appeared from the shadows, her face awestruck. Only Lola was absent, her cowardice ensuring her elimination. They all stopped when they saw us. Saw Orion holding me. Saw the silver marks still faintly glowing on my arms. Saw the pups forming their guard. Frank's face had gone ashen. "Spirit Walker," he breathed, and the words rippled through the assembled crowd like wind through grass. Gasps. Whispers. Some dropped to their knees. Orion lowered me carefully to my feet, steadying me when my legs threatened to buckle. Then, before I could process what was happening, he knelt before me. The Lycan king, alpha of the Blood Moon Pack, ruler of the Northern Territories, the most feared wolf in 3 kingdoms, bowed his head and dropped to one knee in the blood-soaked earth. "No," I whispered, shocked. "You can't." "I can. I will." He looked up at me, and his eyes were blazing with something fierce and eternal. "You are my true mate. My spirit walker. My Luna." His voice carried across the clearing, a declaration meant for every ear. "You calmed my beast when no one else could. You commanded the sacred litter before they even knew your name. You saved my life at the cost of your own." He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing the fading marks on my wrist. "I claim you, ember of the Blood Moon Pack. Before the moon. Before my people. Before the ancestors." The pups' howling intensified, their voices climbing higher. Daniel stepped forward and bowed deeply. Then Ephraim, scars still fresh but eyes clear. One by one, the warriors followed. Even Frank, with visible reluctance, lowered his head. "Will you have me?" Orion's question was quiet now, meant only for me. "Will you stand at my side? Will you be the anchor for my beast, the Luna for my pack?" I looked down at this impossible man who'd terrified me, hunted me, and now knelt in the dirt offering me everything. I thought of my mother's whispered words, "Stay small, stay safe," and realized that some things were worth being seen for, worth fighting for, worth becoming more than I'd ever imagined. "I will." My voice was steady despite the tears on my cheeks. "I accept." The forest erupted in howls, pack members shifting and joining their voices with the pups. Orion rose and pulled me into his arms, his kiss claiming me as surely as his words had. Fierce and desperate and achingly gentle all at once. When we broke apart, Daniel approached with a crown of woven silver and moonflowers, the Luna's crown, ancient and sacred. Orion took it reverently and placed it on my head, his hands lingering in my blonde braids. "My Luna," he murmured. "My salvation." The midnight pup threw back his head and howled, and his siblings joined in perfect harmony, 12 voices proclaiming what they'd known from the very beginning. I was theirs. I was his. I was home.
If you enjoyed this story, Please subscribe to the channel for more werewolf romance tales, alpha kings, rejected mates, and powerful omega stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Leave a comment below telling me where you are watching from. Your support means everything and helps me create more content like this. Thank you for reading, and I'll see you in the next. Your hopeless romantic, Hemora.